The fundamental things apply as time goes by.
D'habitude, ce sont les garçons qui parlent. Ce sont peut-être de mauvaises habitudes.
Parler avec les mots des autres.
From Hollywood classics of the 1970s to a Parisian love triangle that scandalized Cannes 50 years ago, today's film show is a blast from the past. For a new look at some vintage releases, I'm joined by our film critic, Lisa Nesselson. Lisa, hello.
Hi.
And you are starting with the 100th birthday of one of Hollywood's major Golden Age film studios. Warner Brothers is being celebrated with a big retrospective here in Paris.
Indeed, anybody who's aware of the movies as having a history almost certainly knows and loves many a Warner film. In honor of this centenary, 100 Warner films will be making their way to French screens in the weeks and months to come. From the first talking picture, The Jazz Singer, to King Kong, to The Wizard of Oz, to Citizen Kane, Casablanca, Singing in the Rain, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Blade Runner. There are also some French properties, A Very Long Engagement by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, The Artist by Michel Hazanavicius, and films shot at least partly in France, like An American in Paris and Inception. Stanley Kubrick was faithful to Warner, and they to him. Same thing goes for Clint Eastwood and for Christopher Nolan. And looking at the list, I think I've seen all but 4 of them, and there are very few I don't like. The French Cinematheque kicked things off in April and May with a collection of movies starring some of the studio's most emblematic stars: Joan Blondell, Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, Bette Davis, Errol Flynn, Edward G. Robinson, and a new batch, Warner Brothers and the 1970s, is now underway. Now, a lot of those are movies that made their way into my very young movie-going brain, and always on large screens in movie theaters in the dark because there was no home video yet.
Of course, and Lisa, just listening to you list off those movies, I can tell this is an event that's going to evoke a lot of nostalgia. Let's take a look at some of those Warner Brothers classics from the 70s. Now, Lisa, as you said, you've seen almost all 100 of those movies. Give us some of your favorites.
Well, some silly, some brilliant. It's very hard to choose. You've heard of the French New Wave? Well, Warner produced a real wave in the 1978 surfing film Big Wednesday, which is called Graffiti Party in French. It was written and directed by John Milius, who also wrote some Dirty Harry scripts with Clint Eastwood and Conan the Barbarian. And of course, Casablanca is a masterpiece that everybody should see at least once.
And this would be the perfect chance to see it on a big screen, particularly for those here in France. Now, France is perhaps unique in that vintage films, whether re-releases or retrospectives, are really a cornerstone of the movie market. Lisa, why do you think French filmgoers tend to embrace those older films, not just on TV or on DVD, but in actual movie theaters?
Well, I think that in part is because there was never really a thriving video rental business in France. There were some stores, but not a lot. And because cinema studies are anchored in French education, viewers really don't object to paying for old movies. They don't say that's old, it's worth less. In fact, they treasure the chance to see them on a big screen with an audience. So this week in Paris, in addition to Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, and Fast and Furious, Roman numeral 10, you can see batches of films by Martin Scorsese, Jean Renoir, David Lynch, a collection of movies that happen to star Leonardo DiCaprio, films going back to the 1960s that won the Golden Palm in Cannes. I could go on and on and on.
And it is such a different experience when you see those films in the theaters. We're going to stay with vintage cinema and the work of a seminal French writer-director whose work was incredibly difficult to see for decades due to rights issues. Lisa, tell us about Jean Eustache.
Gladly. Now, if I told you that a 50-year-old French film in black and white with a running time of 3 hours and 41 minutes, consisting mostly of 3 characters Talking was one of the box office success stories of 2022. This week, all 12 of Jean Eustache's films, which vary in length from short to medium to very long, including, once again, The Mother and the Whore, are on French screens. Re-released late last year, The Mother and the Whore caused a scandal at the 1973 Cannes Film Festival, back when a scandal really was a scandal. It's the story of a Paris-set love triangle. One man, played by Jean-Pierre Léaud, and two women, played by Bernadette Lafont and Françoise Lebrun, awash in disillusionment after the unkept promises of May 68. Now, the sexual revolution is still underway, but it turns out not to be as much fun as promised. Because why? Well, people still have emotions, and couples and or inadvertent ménages à trois still present logistical problems. Shot in the streets of Paris, especially the area around Saint-Germain-des-Prés, it's a masterpiece, one of my favorite films of all time in any language, and only beat-up prints or bootleg videos were available until Eustache's sons finally struck a deal to restore and re-release their late father's work. Adding to the melancholy aura of genius is the fact that their late father killed himself, and he left a sign on his door that said, "Knock as if you want to raise the dead."
Wow. All right, Lisa, well, let's take a look at that messy love triangle in French classic The Mother and the Whore.
Comment voulez-vous faire l'amour? Tendrement ou violemment? Chaque matin, chaque jour que nous ne passons pas ensemble est un jour que nous perdons. C'est un massacre, c'est un crime.
J'ai envie de rebaiser avec vous. Pourquoi les femmes n'auraient-elles pas le droit de dire qu'elles ont envie de baiser avec un type?
Écoutez, mon vieux, je dois vous dire que vos amours commencent à m'emmerder.
Je suis affreuse.
Mais vous avez une façon d'être affreuse qui vous va très bien.
Now, Lisa, I am intrigued, but what makes you so confident that huge numbers of people are really going to spend their money on going to see a black and white classic when they could, go see the flashy new Transformers movie instead?
Well, maybe not huge, but a lot, a substantial number. As I said earlier, vintage films and restored re-releases in regular cinemas are a cornerstone of French box office. This sector has gone up 20% in the past 2 decades. In the post-lockdown era, France was in much better shape than most countries because French audiences will pay to see an old movie. Even most French people don't realize just how unique this is. And it's very safe to say that French movie audiences continue to be open to an extremely wide range of all kinds of films from all over the world.
And Lisa, speaking of films from all over the world, you are going to tell us about one newer film. It's from Romanian animator Anca, Damian. It's co-produced by Romania, France, and Belgium, and it's been billed as an upside-down Robinson Crusoe. Tell us about The Island.
Oh, that is a good way of putting it. It's customary to say that an artist has a lot of imagination or expresses lyrical ideas, but in Anca Damian's case, this is her 7th animated feature, the creativity just washes over you in layers of inventive delight. In English, she sets out to revisit a story everybody has rattling around in their brains, and she shakes our gray matter in slightly different directions. So our protagonist, Robinson, is shipwrecked alone on an island. Or perhaps he chose to live there alone. Somehow he has an iPad that still works, and he uses it to frame his distinctive but fairly desolate surroundings. And he's also lonely and traumatized by being the only survivor from his sailing vessel. Another man washes ashore, and Robinson names him Friday. And Friday is almost laughably obsequious, calling his host Savior. Yes, Savior, of course, Savior. But under harsh physical or political circumstances, who really saves who? The movie is a semi-musical. There are sung lyrics and a constant undertow of instrumentation that could be grating and irritating, but is actually very pleasing. There's no dead air, no downtime. The animation is always expanding, moving forward in interesting ways, and she shows you things you've never quite seen before.
And I do love an animated musical. The look here is slightly psychedelic, Lisa, but the themes, it turns out, are actually quite down to earth.
Oh, yeah, there's a subtext of how refugees are treated. The film shows us this large structure called Promised Land for Refugees, made with the best of intentions, which is not the amusement park its facade sort of promises, but a detention camp with armed guards and barbed wire. Migrants here are not called boat people or refugees, but the people who float. Now, Anca Damian has made 2 masterworks so far. Krulik, The Path to Beyond, an animated account of a harrowing true miscarriage of justice, and the philosophical gem Morona's fantastic tale, the world seen through the eyes of a dog who experiences multiple humans.
I do love that phrase of the people who float. We'll leave all of you with the trippy imagery of the island. Lisa, thank you so much as always. Lots of excuses to revisit old films this week. Thanks to all of you for watching. For more culture news, you can always head to our website or find us on social media. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Versailles, Mont-Saint-Michel, the Louvre are well-known stars of French heritage. But French genius and France harbors many other hidden treasures. The arts, gastronomy, architecture, as well as nature's wonders. Come along with France 24, discover France's living heritage. From young apprentices to accomplished craftsmen and farmers, to Michelin star sporting chefs, meet these people whose passion for their professions preserve and drive French heritage.
You are here on France 24 and France24.com.